morning's webinar is to do a brief orientation into our FIMR maternal interview process. Many of you have participated in our fetal and infant mortality review team, where we review cases of infant death that have occurred to Native American and Alaskan Native families in the state of Michigan. And that process has given us a lot of really rich and good information about what our families are facing and how our coalition and our team of home visitors and community members can really be responsive to what's going on out there. And that data has in part informed a lot of our coalition priorities and a lot of the activities and initiatives that we've done over the past few years. So the maternal interview really allows us to do a deeper dive into the FIMR process and to let families share their stories of what happened to them. So this morning I'll go over the procedures and forms and questions that we will be conducting to do those interviews, share a little bit about some cultural information and self-care strategies that we can use to inform our work, and then to go over some program updates at the end so that hopefully you'll have a better picture of how this initiative might fit into the work that you're already doing. So the question, why are we conducting FIMR maternal interviews after all these years? We haven't done any FIMR maternal interviews. There are FIMR teams throughout the state who have been doing it for a very long time. It just took us some time to get everything set up and to get ourselves mentally prepared to do this and to just be really sure that this is something our team and our community thought would be beneficial. And it is going to be beneficial, we believe, for a number of reasons. The first is just that many women who experience a pregnancy loss or the death of their child are really eager to talk about what happened to them, because in our society, particularly when it comes to pregnancy loss or the death of a baby, we are a bit stigmatizing towards those types of losses and not perhaps as supportive as we could be as a culture in terms of wrapping love around those families and really letting them share in their own words what happened to them. So it can be really healing and start that pathway towards improved mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health for them to sit with someone who is trusted and non-judgmental and share what happened to them in their pregnancy, birth, and then through the death of their child. The FIMR maternal interview is also a really great way to link up with women who are in need of specialized care and to offer to share those resources to her and her family. So a lot of families who do experience a pregnancy loss or an infant death aren't families who are very well connected to the other services in the community. We know that for sure from our FIMR case reviews. These are often families who have slipped through the cracks and they're not wrapped around in that tribal service area or local resources. So that's a really good opportunity for us to get in there and share those with her so that she can access those if she wants. Another reason why we have decided to start conducting FIMR maternal interviews is that we know medical records are often incomplete. Anyone who has sat in our case review team meeting knows that it can be so frustrating when we really want some good quality information as to what this family experienced and what happened to them along the way. And we're often not able to get that just from the medical records alone. So the maternal interview allows us to get a better picture of what happened and then to hear from the mother what happened to her in her own words. This allows us ultimately to be more responsive to community and family needs. Our coalition and our SABI-K coalition and our network of staff, those meetings that we've been having, that will allow us to say, okay, for all of these families, they're telling us that these issues are really prevalent and they are asking us to do something about it. We can help out in that way and But we can't do that from the medical records alone. We really need that picture and that story from the family as to what happened to them. There's also just the pragmatic aspect of this. The supplemental funding that we received does allow us to offset costs to other programs so that we can make those dollars stretch a little further and serve more people. So just some notes about the language that we'll be using in the program. The FIMR maternal interview really is to focus on the mother of the baby. So you will see mother used throughout the webinar and in the program forms. However, we always wish to honor male caregivers, father of the baby, kinship relations such as aunties and grandmothers, and then the transgendered and two-spirit caregivers who have experienced miscarriage, stillbirth, and infant loss. Other supportive caregivers might be able to join the interview if you and your client find that that is helpful and acceptable. Other teams have told me that the fathers often really need that time to express their grief because society doesn't often give men ways to grieve and experience their loss in a supportive way. We kind of expect that the men will be strong and they won't cry and they won't have that grief because their primary focus is on the mother of their child and how she's doing. So sometimes you may find that male caregivers, father of the baby, and partners will wish to join in on the interviews. And if you and your client think that's okay, that's totally acceptable for us as well. So the criteria to be interviewed for this project is that the individual must be American Indian or Alaska Native person who has experienced a miscarriage, stillbirth, or infant death in the past 2 years. And miscarriage really is in reference to a pregnancy loss up to 20 weeks gestation. Stillbirth, it would be a pregnancy loss 20 weeks to a full-term birth. And for purposes of the FIMR maternal interview, it doesn't matter what the gestational age was. It doesn't matter the cause or manner of death. We're really interested in just reaching out to anyone who has experienced that tragedy and getting them into services and having them to share their stories. And we did want to open it up to anyone who's experienced that type of loss for the past 2 years. Because this is our first time conducting this type of initiative and we really want to reach out to people, we know that there's a lot of unhealed hurt from these experiences. We want to get to those women if we can. So
I think that's a really great idea.
Thank you. Was that Anne?
Yeah, I do. Just because I have, when I first started, I had a family, and I did what I could and what, before but it really would have been, and I know that she would appreciate the fact that this is, a native, a tribal recognition, because she seriously didn't get that. I probably was the only person that still asks. She lost a twin, so she still has the other, the twin brother, but it's just been, I think, I'm already zeroing in that I can interview her, so I'm sorry, but I just want to add that.
No, don't be sorry. Thank you for sharing that. That's something that we have found is that women are really in need of that helping, caring person to just sit and listen. Because often no one's ever asked them, how are you doing? What happened to you? Are you okay? And what can we do to help you from here on out? So I think that's a very cool story that you just shared. Thank you.
Yeah.
That brings me to my next point, that you may have home visiting clients that you're already thinking of who might be eligible to be interviewed, and that's awesome. That's perfectly fine. There may be women who aren't in home visiting that we might be reaching out to, and that's okay too. This program won't be restricted to just home visiting clients, although they may be in home visiting already. So that may be an option, that be another point of entry to care if you think it's appropriate for someone to receive that extra support for a current pregnancy, for their parenting, or for interconception care, which we know is really important for a healthy next pregnancy. So I do have a list of potential individuals, that we may reach out to, and your wheels may be already spinning about women that you might want to reach out to too. So we'll do some of that coordinating after the webinar to see what fits and what feels good and what works for you. So some of the cases will have been reviewed by our FIMR case review team, and others may not. So there's no requirement that if we've done a medical records review that we're going to automatically do a FIMR maternal interview, or that if we do an interview we're going to necessarily pull the records. We're treating this sort of as a separate way of collecting stories from families who are willing to share. So the funding is a reimbursement process. We do have money from the state of Michigan to conduct the interviews and to do the bereavement home visits that we've been working really hard to roll out. So we have $125 that will go to the tribe for each interview or visit conducted. How you spend the funds is completely up to you and your supervisor. There's a number of different things that you could use that money for. It could be spent on your staff time, your travel, certainly participant incentive, because we're hoping that you will be able to offer a gift card for the mother's participation in the interview. And then we're also hoping that you might use that funding to offer a gift or a memento for the family, because those special items are really meaningful for women and it really helps them with their healing. So you can use that funding to offset other program costs in support of reducing infant mortality. So all of our work is related and it's all in support of families. We're really after the goal of reducing infant mortality and improving women's health. So this funding is just another avenue that we can use to do that. The process for receiving that funding is very simple. After you conduct an interview or a home visit, you will send an invoice to the ITC along with all of your other program invoices that you do to request that reimbursement. You will just follow the normal protocols and accounting procedures that your site uses to receive payment from all of the other grant programs that you work on. However, if you do want to approach this as an independent consultant, that's perfectly fine too. In that case, you'll just submit the invoice with your own contact information and have a W-9 with your request if we don't have one already, because I know that there are some people who aren't working with the tribe. Like Beth, I can see that you're on the line now, and if you wanted that extra support, you could do it that way too. And at the end of the webinar, I'll show you what those program forms are so that you know where to access them and what they look like.
Okay.
We really wanted it to be simple, straightforward, very easy to access funding.
So Rayanne, this is Elizabeth. Just a reminder, so people just need to be mindful. I mean, obviously, if you're like conducting the interview while you're on home visitor time that's covered by the tribe, you couldn't, then bill individually. That would be, because the tribe is paying for your time. So in that situation, the tribe would need to bill us, and we would send a check made out to the tribe. If you are going to be doing this as kind of more an independent consultant on your own time, then you just need to be sure that you're doing all the work related to it, during a time when you're either on annual leave or it's a time you're not scheduled to work. And for that, I'm a little concerned about liability issues. I mean, if you're conducting interviews while you're on company time, then, you're covered by all the protections that you have as a tribal employee. If you are operating as, an independent, then, if you have a nursing license, then that might be one thing. But if you don't, there's just think about those things. I mean, not that you're doing clinical services or doing anything that is going to make you, vulnerable to any kind of liability issues, but it's just something to think about. And no matter what you do, just, be sure to have a conversation with your supervisor so everybody is aware of who's doing what on whose time.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for doing that clarification. We do have enough funding to cover 24 visits, including the FIMR maternal interviews and the bereavement home visits that some of our staff will be doing for the rest of this fiscal year. So we have a goal of conducting 4 FIMR maternal interviews by the end of September. So now I will go into the actual mechanics of conducting the interview. And these recommendations all come from other FIMR teams who have a lot of experience doing interviews and some of the training that I myself have received as the FIMR coordinator. So everything I'm sharing with you comes from either the national or state FIMR teams. And they do have some recommendations about what to bring with you when you go to the interview. We recommend that you bring toys and activities for older children, tissues, sharpened pencils or a pen, and then all of the program forms that you will need, the consent form, the visit log, your gift card or incentive, interview questions, and any resources and handouts that you want to leave with the family. There is some mental preparation that you can do to just prepare for the interview and to get into the right space for doing this kind of work, which can be challenging in a way. It's recommended that you really know yourself well and honor your own beliefs, work through your own thoughts about death, and keep in mind that you're human and you matter and you are important in this process. So really working on that self-care and that self-actualization so that you can come to this in the best way possible. They do recommend to try to keep intrusive thoughts out of your mind so you can really focus on the mother and her needs. We won't be doing audio or video recording for this, so it's really relying on your notes to be able to go back and to remember what she talked about. And we did that for a couple of reasons. One, because there's just a lot more work that would go into the consent form and policies and procedures at each tribe if we were to do any type of recording. And we heard from several of the home visitors that they didn't think it was appropriate to keep that information recorded in any way other than just note taking. So that's why for this year at least we're going to just stick with notes. During the interview, there's a couple of points I wanted to make. The first is that you might be working with teen or very young mothers, and due to their age and development, they may say or do things that seem inappropriate for older moms. They also might be very sad that their baby has died or that their pregnancy has ended, yet their own family might be relieved. You'll sometimes see that, the grandma is like, really relieved that, she feels like this was just part of her daughter's journey and now she can finish high school or college or whatever that is. But that mom is still grieving the loss of her child and that potential future that she had dreamed about. So in terms of working with teen and adolescent mothers, you'll really tap into that experience you have from home visiting to support her in that way. It's really a relationship-based and a trust-based process. So it's really just to cultivate the trust with her that you're not there in any type of punitive or punishment capacity, that you're really just there to listen in a non-judgmental way. Assure her that you're not judging her or any family members or healthcare facilities or healthcare providers that she may mention. This whole process, like our FIMR case review meetings, will be completely de-identified, so she should be free to vent or share successes or things that were frustrating for her in a safe way. And our job is really just to listen and to take that in. So this work will be really successful for us as interviewers if we know our values but if we don't share them with the mother because it's not appropriate at that time to share what your thoughts are about what might have happened to her, how things were handled in certain times of her pregnancy and birth. During the interview, moms are probably going to want to know, how on earth did you get my information? How do you know that this happened to me? And that's completely understandable. So what you'll tell them is that we are part of a small group of people who are notified when an infant in the community passes away. We do keep everything confidential. No names or identifying information will ever be shared with the team or even outside of our team. We're not doing any reporting on this to publish anything. We're really just doing that relationship-based care so that we can hear from the families what happened to them. Assure the mothers that this isn't research. We're really just there so that they can share their stories to help other families in need and to link them to local resources that might be beneficial for their healing. The steps of the interview are, one, you'll introduce yourself and the purpose of the interview, and we do have a letter that has a script so that if you are interested in using that, you could follow it word for word if you had to. It talks about the purpose of the interview and what's expected, and there is also a consent form and a time that your client will be able to ask any questions and get clarification before you begin. Then that's the time when you will give the gift card, and the reason that we're doing the gift card at the beginning of the interview instead of the end is because we don't want to seem like we are coercing the mom in any way to answer the questions. We're really just giving her the gift card for any level of participation. She may answer some of the questions and not others, or all of them. So we wanted to be clear that we're giving this to her for her time, no matter what degree of participation she's comfortable doing. So then we'll go. Yep.
Rayanne, this is Beth.
Sure.
Quick question. I don't want to stop your roll there, but I kind of cringed at first when I saw that up front, and then with your explanation, I just wonder if anybody's had experience with that, because it seems as though, I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from, so it made sense to me. Has anybody had any experience giving it up front and or at the end?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. Okay.
I did a gift to this mom that I was referring to earlier in the webinar of that she lost her twins, and on the anniversary date, I brought two. It was in September. The baby was born in July, the last day of July, and died the 3rd of September. But on the 3rd of September, I brought two big planted chrysanthemums and put them on her porch, and she knew I brought two, and that was accepted in a very, very positive way. That meant a lot to her.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's probably all I really, it's just that was the first time I ever thought to give something.
Okay, just questions I had. Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have any feedback or thoughts as to keeping that gift card in the front or saving it for the end? I'm totally open to whatever you all think is right and what feels comfortable. It is kind of pragmatically easier to keep it at the beginning because you're already going through the consent form, and you'll just check that you did give the gift card or that she declined it. And then you can just continue on with the interview. But if anyone thinks it's better to move that to the end, I'm totally fine with that. It would be perfectly acceptable if that's what you thought was the best thing to do.
Does she know about the gift card ahead of time? Like, is there like an introduction? Like, for example, if I was going to go into a home where I haven't been doing, say, a home visit regularly with her, other than me contacting her by phone ahead of time, is there any way that she knows I'm coming? And
Yeah,
is that
yep,
enough?
because
Okay.
yep, we do have an introduction letter and then a script for a phone call that you can make just
Okay.
to let her know that you will be contacting her by phone. So the first contact that you'll have is through a letter, and
Okay.
that will allow her to either call you to schedule that if she's interested, and it'll also let her know that you will be reaching out by phone if we have that contact information specifically for the purposes of conducting the interview. And when we were designing all of the program forms, including that first initial letter, we did have some discussion around not sharing that there was an incentive or a monetary incentive because we didn't want to seem like we were coercing women during this very fragile or sensitive time for them. So the gift card is kind of just an extra little something that we'll provide unless you think it's really good to just be transparent and put that in the very first contact that, you know, there is some incentive to participate.
No, I think it's personally, I think it's best to leave it out like you have it. So.
Okay. So then the actual interview questions, I'm going to pull those up and share them with you. We've been refining these questions and a group of home visitors who have been helping me write these. There were many, many interview tools and questionnaires that we could have used. However, we wanted to keep it as simple as possible, and we really wanted the questions to match with the goals of the program, which isn't to collect any research type data or public health surveillance type of data. We're really just interested in having those moms share their stories and share what happened to them. So I hope you like the questions, and if there are still some adjustments that we need to make, that's totally fine. And when the interview is finished, that's when you'll be able to do those referrals to any local bereavement resources that you might think is appropriate, parent support groups in your area, behavioral health services, whatever it is that that client is looking for. And then you might do some follow-up and schedule an RTS visit if you are one of the home visitors who is going to be trained in providing the results or sharing. And if not, then you will just thank her for her time and leave any gifts behind and leave your contact information in case she does want to follow up and perhaps look into enrolling in Healthy Start or Tribal. So I'm going to go now, switch the screen over to the interview questions. Form is pretty straightforward. It just has a client ID for your own purposes so that you keep track of the interviews you're doing at your site, the date of the visit, the location of the visit, and who is conducting it. The location of the visit is really up to you and your professional determination what is the best and most appropriate location. It may be a home visit. It may be an office visit. Some women, if they've already gone back to work, might wish to meet you on their lunch break or whatever it is, those policies and procedures that you would typically follow for meeting women at your site as part of your normal job. And some of these might be done over the phone. That would be appropriate too, and you could still receive that $125 reimbursement for any interviews that were conducted over the phone if that was your only way that you could get a hold of this mom. So tips before the interview. We're really working on establishing relationships with local funeral homes as a point of contact for reaching bereaved parents. We do receive information when there is a death that occurs in the community. However, we might get that notification 4 to 6 months after the death occurs. So if we're really hoping to get to moms and dads and reach them during their time of need, that really vulnerable time right after the death of their child, we might consider starting to do some of the outreach with funeral homes so that if a death does occur, they think of you automatically and they'll give you a call and let you know. So we can receive phone numbers and addresses from local hospital medical records. By law, they are required to release the medical record to our team under the public health code. And we do have documentation from the governor's office and from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services that gives us authority to conduct these types of initiatives. And we do have those forms on our shared Google Drive in case you do need to access that for some reason. So when scheduling the interview, suggest to meet somewhere safe and comfortable. They can be done over the phone if necessary. It's best if you have already worked with the family prior to the interview, again, because it is that relationship-based initiative and you really want to have that trust with her as much as possible. A lot of teams have shared with us that if you can't get a hold of this woman, to keep trying. Text, call, email, mail, do whatever you need to do to get a hold of her, because we know that our women are often in chaotic environments and for different reasons they're not able to answer the phone. So you might get creative in how you do that outreach. Women who have returned to work may still want to work with you. So a lot of people think, well, once a woman's gone back to work, is it like digging up old wounds? Is it really appropriate to still do that outreach with her? You might still consider asking if this is something that she would want to participate in, because a lot of the research shows that once family members like the husband or the grandma has gone back to work following the death of a baby, those women feel extra isolated. They're looking around now, their partner's not there, their mom's not there, everyone's gone back to work. They still are desiring that extra support that you can provide. So consider meeting her on her lunch break or on whatever time is appropriate. During the interview, ask the parent what their baby's name was and use that throughout the entire interview. Use words like your son or your daughter if you think that's appropriate as well. Show the parent that you care and that you're not here to judge them. Be aware of how your body language and facial expression might suggest surprise, disgust, or dissatisfaction, because those little subtle facial expressions or body movement might seem like they're judgmental to the parent. So to really focusing on that neutral positioning to show that you're caring and empathetic, even when you hear things that might be shocking to you or disturbing. This was some training that we received, all of us FIMR coordinators, about cultural and linguistic differences, and it was really interesting, the discussion around how medical terminology is understood by different kinds of cultures and different speakers of English and Spanish. So we had an example where there was a Hispanic woman who spoke English and Spanish, and she thought her doctor said her baby had a demon, and she was very offended by that. She just couldn't believe that, you know, a healthcare professional would say something so hurtful about her child. And it wasn't until the FIMR interview was conducted that her nurse helped her explain that her doctor actually was telling her that her son had edema, and that is part of what contributed to his passing. So those little differences in the medical terminology, that's really where you, the experts, will help the family work through some of those questions that they might have about what happened. And then you'll sign the confidentiality forms and give the gift card. So moving on to the questions that we are asking. In the consent form, it's very clear that these are just sample questions. You might ask them, and she's perfectly free to refuse to answer. She might spend an hour just talking about one of them, and then the end of the visit is there, and that's okay if you've only done one question. There's no minimum or maximum amount of questions that we're looking to get from these interviews. The first question is, did your doctor tell you the reason for your baby's death? What did she or he say? If the baby died in the hospital, you'll ask, what did you see and experience in the hospital at the time of your baby's death? And if they died at home, you might ask, in your own words, can you tell me what happened at the time of your son or daughter's death? How helpful were the doctors and nurses who took care of you and your baby at the time of your baby's passing? What grief and bereavement services were offered to you by hospital staff? And what local bereavement services have you utilized, if any? How were you treated by healthcare staff throughout your pregnancy, birth, and after your baby was born? Those questions can be really illuminating as to how the family was treated and what they thought about the care that they received. Can you tell me a bit about your son and daughter's funeral? Have you done any grief work or traditional ceremonies for yourself since the death of your son or daughter? And finally, how do you wish to keep your son and daughter's memory alive? And if you determine that the parent is ready to answer this question, what would you want to share with other parents who are going through a similar situation? And there's room in there to do any additional note-taking or follow-up questions and comments that you might have. And this form will be available on our website, and we'll put it on that shared Google Drive also so that you can access that. So it's best to use simple and genuine phrases throughout the interview process and through any follow-up visits that you might conduct. So really simple is better. I'm sorry this happened to you. How are you doing? What can I do for you? I'm here and I want to listen. It's important not to assume to know what the mother is feeling because people grieve in so many diverse ways. You know, we think, oh, she should be crying her eyes out, or she's too stoic, or she's, hysterical. And I know I don't need to tell you all this, but sometimes we go in with those preconceived notions of what grief really looks like. And women who have experienced the loss of their child or a pregnancy loss, their grief might not look like anything we've ever seen or experienced before. So we're really there to just hold that space for that person and give them the empathetic care that they deserve, no matter where they are in their journey. And it's best to avoid any type of, judgmental phrases or advice giving like, oh, you can have another baby, it's okay, you're still young. Those types of hurtful phrases that I know you have all experienced yourself. When we had that sharing time at our last meeting, it came up again and again that obviously this isn't helpful. So I know you're all experts in that and you're all very caring and empathetic already, but those are just some good reminders. Female maternal interviewers are mandatory reporters according to the policies and procedures of your regular job. And we'll put that in the consent form. It'll be really transparent that we're required by law to report abuse and neglect. So you'll just, work with your supervisor to be really clear about what those procedures are. And then you'll think back to the training that we just had on what those different pieces of mandatory reporting will look like for you and your site. If there's an instance where a mother that you're working with expresses a suicide ideation or any other emergency mental health concern, a lot of you were certified at the Safe Talk training that we had a couple of years ago. So you can actually utilize those skills, help her get linked up with the appropriate resources in your community, be aware of the mental health care facilities or emergency room that you might be referring her to, and then also keep on hand information about the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And I did put the number and website on there for your reference. There are cards and things that you can order to keep in your pocket if you go to that suicidepreventionlifeline.org. So some cultural perspectives that I wanted to share to help inform this work that we're doing. And everything I'm going to share with you this morning is really just to help you in your work and to do the best that we can to serve Native American families, to really revitalize some of that knowledge and use the approaches and perspectives that might connect with our families. And everything that I share, of course, I've always given tobacco to my teachers to be able to share this back with you, done that permission, so hopefully this will all be helpful as we go forward. So care of the mother, that's so important. In the first 4 to 7 days. It's really going to depend on that person and what their beliefs are, but the teachings that we have heard for our FIMR team is that the family and community members should cook all the meals for the bereaved family. They really shouldn't be concerned with feeding everyone who's coming to visit or give their respects. So if possible, it's best if they can receive that outside help. One of our spiritual advisors shared with us that the grieving mother should be spoon-fed her first bite of traditional food after the death of her baby, and that's to help ensure that she has a healthy grieving period in the year after her loss. Gifts and mementos are appropriate, and those can be whatever you think is best. It might be a blanket or a teddy bear or flowers or a bracelet. There's a number of different websites that you can go on and order gifts for bereaved parents who have lost a child. And we did confirm with several different traditional healers that that is appropriate and good for the parents to receive. Grief is natural and expected, so there's never any expectation that they'll just get over it and that there's a timeline on their grief. They should be free to let their tears flow. We heard a lot of teachings about the power of tears and how important it is for them to feel like this is a safe space to just cry, men and women and other family members and children. Remember that grief takes time and it doesn't have an expiration date. Let the mother grieve as long as she needs to. One of our spiritual advisors told us this is really important because you may hear from different people in the family or different types of healthcare professionals. They really mean well, but it's not helpful for mothers to hear, oh, the grieving process is only 7 days, or the grieving process is 10 days, or even just a year. You might be working with families who are still grieving a loss, years and years after it has occurred. And on the flip side, someone might seem like they're getting back to normal really quickly after a loss. So we really have to just hold the space for them however long it needs to be. There will be a time when she's ready to let go of her baby spirit, and she'll know that, and she'll share that with whomever she thinks is appropriate. We did confirm with our traditional spiritual advisor that it's good to visit the gravesite and leave gifts if that's something that brings comfort to the family. There's, follow the teachings that she's comfortable with, but if she finds that visiting the gravesite and leaving offerings of tobacco or food or whatever that might be, flowers, that's good for her and her healing journey. Something else that's important for our moms is that they should do things that make them happy. They should follow the teachings that they've heard and that they're comfortable with. Sometimes you might hear that after you've experienced the loss, you should give up something, like you should give up, dancing or give up singing or drumming. And we had a spiritual advisor who said, when you lose a baby, it's different because the grief is so complicated and different than other types of losses that we experience, that mothers should feel free to do things that make her happy. It's not right to ask her to give up things that make her happy. So that's something that gives comfort to the families you work with. You could share that with them. We did hear a lot of teachings at our last meeting about caring for mothers and different grief ceremonies that are appropriate for healing from the loss of a child, including wiping of the tears, ritual cleansing. There's a lot of different ritual cleansing that might occur, including cedar bath, a sweat lodge. In indigenous Mexican communities, they have a ritual cleansing that's called limpias, smudging. So anything that's helpful for them. They might want to know what's going on in the community or who you know that does those types of ceremonies that they can ask for some help. And then a lot of families will do a memorial feast 1 year after the death. And that's a good time when the community and all of her support people can give gifts to her so that she knows she's loved and supported and that we're wrapping around her in that supportive capacity. So self-care for maternal interviewers is really important, and FIMR teams have really started to focus on how we are affected as professionals by sitting with women and holding that space for them, and how challenging it is and how it can affect us and physically, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. So one of our spiritual advisors, I took some tobacco to him and I shared with him that we were going to start doing this bereavement initiative and FIMR maternal interviews, and explained a bit about the process and who you all are and what you do. And he said what you really want to share with them is that working with grief or working with people who are in grief is an inside illness. So over time, if there isn't any healthy and appropriate way that we deal with the negativity and sadness and heavy feelings that we encounter while doing this type of very challenging and sad work, it can start to affect our health. And it can affect our immune time and menopause down the road. So we really want to be aware that as women, we have a very special role in helping others who are grieving, and that we take care to protect ourselves. And we did hear a lot of these strategies from Liz when she was here, and of course there are things that we just know from our culture that are appropriate for self-care. And these are just some ideas and suggestions that might connect with you or might not, and that's okay. Our spiritual advisor, I asked him, what's the top thing you would tell them if they're experiencing a lot of sadness or of grief from doing this type of work with families? And he said, my answer is smudge, smudge, smudge. Find whatever those medicines are that you're smudging with that help you. We have cedar, sage, sweetgrass, copal, lavender, bergamot, whatever it is that helps you feel better and connects with you spiritually to give you that cleansing of those negative feelings. The second thing he said was that you really need to rest and take breaks. Feel free to take time off of work. He shared that when he conducts an infant funeral, he takes a whole week off. He can't really be there for others until he's had that time to rest. So even if you just take some time to walk outside or sit and play Bejeweled Blitz or whatever it is that you need to do to just reset yourself and have that break. Drink plenty of clean water. We heard from Liz that water in and of itself is a medicine. There's a spirit in that that's helping us every time we ingest it, and we want to honor that by drinking clean water and caring for ourselves in that way. You also heard some teachings around cedar tea and a cedar bath. The eagle feather fan ceremony, you remember when she came around and was just fanning us off with those eagle feathers. The power of tears, again, feel like you have the power to cry and to cry for yourself and to cry for those families, and just let that come out. It's a really powerful way to relieve stress. Exercise is going to release endorphins, and it keeps oxygen flowing to your organs. So you might feel that inside illness. You might feel like something is slow within you. Something as simple as taking a 10 or 15-minute walk can help you to get your oxygen levels up and keep that blood flowing. Sometimes that tiredness or weariness can be because our iron or magnesium is low. So you can use some of those strategies that Beth has shared with us to keep your iron up, or do some searching online about different strategies you can do through nutritional therapy to make sure that you're feeling as good as you can. Something that I've heard from a number of different healers and a number of different helpers is to go to the woods. Really go out there and just let it all out. Scream, cry, wail, bang your fists on the ground, hug a tree, do whatever you need to do to let that out, because those trees are there for us as a helper. They've offered that space, that safe space for us to go out there and just to cry and let it all out. And it also is soothing just to have the fresh air and to look around and see that the flowers are blooming and that life is going on around you, and that can be helpful for your self-care as well. So everyone's going to have their own strategies. Really just do whatever works for you. Don't feel the need to apologize if you have to ask for help, professional help, or traditional healing. If you need time off or if you need time to heal after hearing about really difficult deaths or difficult experiences that our families have gone through. After doing this difficult and very important work, you should feel free to take whatever time you need to heal and protect yourself. So we're almost to the end of the webinar. I have just a few more updates that I want to share. The first update is that we are going to offer the Resolve Through Sharing program. It's a certification training, and Carol Sodman Morris is our lead educator on this project. She's a training coordinator who's had many years of experience providing bereavement care to families in need. And so we're very lucky that she's here. She's going to offer that for us at our June in-person meeting. On the agenda, you'll notice that there is, I think, 4 hours of professional development time, and we're going to put the Resolve Through Sharing training in that. So the training itself is free of cost. However, there are 3 online training modules that you can complete before attending the RTS training if you want to receive that certification. So we'll link the site that you'll go on to register to do those online training modules. They take about 2 hours each. So you'll have like a month and a half to get those done, and you can take your time. There is a small cost of $50 to complete those online trainings. You can use your own program funds to do that, or if you need some help with that, we can certainly provide that $50 per person. So just contact me and let me know if that's something you'll need to access. The RTS training might be applicable to other care providers in your agency. So if you know of counselors or social workers or behavioral health care providers or even traditional healers who are interested in having that additional expertise in providing bereavement care specifically for perinatal loss, please feel welcome to reach out to them and let me know if there's someone else that you want to come to receive that certification. Because it's free and local, we really want to open it up to as many providers as possible who will benefit from that. If we were to send any of you to an outside trainer, it'd be around $900 a person just for the class. So we're really lucky from a financial perspective that we are able to do this right here in Michigan. So those were the updates that I had. I'm going to close that out for now and show you the program form. So there is an invoice form that you can access if you don't already have one at your site that you're regularly using, or if you're an independent contractor and you're doing it on your own time, this is the form that you could use to send to us. It's pretty simple and straightforward. All of the information about what grant it's coming out of is already in there. It's got the contact information to Sandy. So you'll just put your name in there. You'll put the date of the visit and then simply put your contact information or your tribe's contact information in there. So it says that it's $125 per visit. So you will submit this every single visit that you do just so that we can keep track every month of how many have been conducted across all of the sites to make sure that we don't go over the maximum amount that we have, which is 24 visits. And then there is just some really simple documentation that we're asking you to complete. And you'll see that on the right-hand side of the screen. It's the bereavement visit log. And I'm going to move it over just a little bit so I can see it. So it has the dates. This can actually be backdated all the way to January 1st. So if there are visits that you've done in support of bereavement care, you could submit to be reimbursed for that time if you wanted to. But starting from here on out, what we're asking is that you'll just keep a very simple log of the client ID. It doesn't have to be a name. Remember, this is all de-identified, so just client 1 or client A or however you want to keep track of that would be fine. Where the visit was conducted, was it done in the home, the office, or over the phone? What topics did you cover? For most of you, this will be the FIMR maternal interview, so that's already in there. And then the date of the visit. And then at the end of the fiscal year, it would be really helpful for us to know the following information. One, how many visits did you conduct in support of this bereavement services or FIMR maternal interview? How many total clients did you serve? And of those, how many were a mother of the baby, how many were father of the baby, and if there were any grandparents and siblings that were also involved. And that just helps us to know how acceptable these services are to our community because we've never done it before. This is our first time. So we're really looking to see, you know, maybe grandparents are always there and they're really interested, or maybe we'll find something surprising about who's really interested in receiving these services. So that's why we have that delineation in there. If you have nothing but mothers of the baby, that's totally fine. Don't feel like you have to go out and find every father or grandparent or sibling. We just wanted to let you know that the funds are appropriately used for any of those people that are there. So that's all that I had to share with you this morning. I wanted to make sure we had time for any questions or discussion or clarification that you might have. I know some of you are still not sure if you're going to be accessing the funding. This is really the time to ask any of those kind of clarifying questions that you might have. Or if you wanted me to go back into the webinar and go through any of the slides again, please do let me know.
Rayanne, I don't know if this is a good time to talk about it or not. This is Beth. I just came back from a lot of good teachings from some elders at a maternal child health symposium. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And they talked significantly about traditionally the 40 days of we need to start talking again about, if you look across the world, 40 days seems to be a marker for that fourth period of pregnancy. And even if it's a miscarriage, you still have a postpartum period, and it isn't just after the bleeding stops. And a lot of people think that 6 weeks out, or when you see your doctor or those things, that you're all back to normal again. And if we don't start addressing that 40-day period where the spirit of the woman comes back into her body, that she's nutritionally taken care of, as you spoke about earlier, that first food, but also warm foods are particularly important. And those are some of those things that I think that we need to start talking about again. And we did do those, and we do those here. It's pretty much across the world that those things are done. A lot of conversation was around the placenta, obviously, because I love placentas, but there was a lot of conversation about it that I didn't know that was brought up by elders about things that are done in the terms of internalizing, which I'm not suggesting that here, but I think that we need to start addressing that time frame instead of just, and I don't mean in the sense of grief. I mean in the sense of care of the woman's body, that just because she has 6 weeks out and has a visit, or 2 weeks out from her miscarriage, or whatever the loss is, that she takes more than that time to allow her body to resettle. And we need to start looking at a longer period of time, because the body truly does not resettle, the spirit truly does not resettle, and that's that fourth stage of a rite of passage, it's called, where we have a time of rite of passage, pregnancy per se, but that real true rite of passage is that time where in that postpartum period, whether it's becoming a mother, which in this case we wouldn't, but in some sense you still are a mother of this being, this spirit, and the spirit stays with you for the personally, it remains with you for the remainder of your life, because it's a part of you the cells of that baby are within your body. We know, you know, the stem cells stay within the mother's body. So it doesn't ever just leave us. So I think we need, I don't know. I guess I would just like there to be some beginning conversations maybe at some point. I don't know if this is even the place to mention it, but it just, when you were talking about the grief period, it just kind of struck me that we need to start having some conversation about that self-care of the mother being a little bit longer period of time. Although the Western world only allows us so much time off of work, I understand that, but she can still integrate those things within her life. And we could probably, you know, not probably, but we will adjust those things. But just thoughts I have that I wanted to get out there on the table.
Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. And I have some of that information and some of those same thoughts too. I actually put them in the webinar and then I took them back out again because I was like, you know, I was just nervous to share some of that information, and I always want to facilitate and never participate. So I really appreciate hearing from you all what your thoughts are about that and what your vision and leadership is, you know, in terms of how we do this project. So I really appreciate, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Other questions or comments?
I was telling, kind of touching on that.
Well, if that's all, I will stop the recording now.